All right. Good morning once again. We're all sensitive to everyone's times and schedules. It is November 17th, 11 a.m. Thank you once again for joining CFE Services Town Hall presentation of the Hygiena EnSURE Touch ATP Test System. A little bit of background. Well, first of all, we want to open up by saying all guests are on mute. So at this point, please use the chat board if you have any questions that you'd like to submit to our panel. Any questions that are submitted, we'll be answering those at the end of the Q&A. We do have a list of Q&As that were submitted prior to today's presentation. And we will also be recording this and providing this for future review by all of you as well as others within your organizations. Utilizing advanced technologies and patented designs, Hygiena provides industry-leading ATP monitoring systems to customers with high quality, innovative technologies that are easy to use and reliable. Many of you are not familiar with the Hygiena EnSURE Touch ATP Test System, but today we're going to help you become more familiar with its protocol and its testing procedures and some of the simplicity in its systems. The EnSURE Touch is an advanced cleaning, verification, and monitoring system that collects, analyzes, and reports data so you can prove the effectiveness of your facility cleaning and housekeeping staff. With us today to share information on this ATP testing is Daniel Wing and Cheyenne Adams of Hygiena. I'm going to turn it over to Dan at this point, let him introduce himself, his background with the company, and then we'll roll into an introductory video on the product itself. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you for your time and joining us today and willingness to learn about this technology. ATP testing is not new, something that has been utilized in various industries for several decades now, actually. The biggest, kind of traditional historical industries that utilize this system are things like healthcare, for example, food processing, right? Industries where there are regulations that really govern and require, cleaning to be verified, right? You have to make sure, that your protocols are being followed and cleaning has been done appropriately to mitigate risk, right? And so those are, agencies like the FDA and USDA and things like that really mandated, or kind of require this level of verification. But now, fast forward to today, right? And we all know that due to the circumstances with the COVID pandemic, that cleaning and verifying, it's always been a good idea, right? Good common sense. But now everyone's just has it so much more top of mind. And so, we've Hygiena, we've been working with more and more clients over this last year, basically, to educate about ATP testing and the benefits it can provide to allow users to, not only verify cleaning outcomes and make sure that protocols are being followed properly, but then help drive improvements as well, right? Help your staff, that's doing cleaning and sanitation in any environment really drive improvements in effectiveness as well as efficiency, right? And there's big gains that can be made through achieving those ends, right? So if you could go ahead and roll the video now, Chad, that'd be great. And just kind of give the brief overview here on the details of the system.
Globally recognized as the leader in ATP and diagnostics testing, we're excited to introduce you to our newest innovation, the EnSURE Touch. From its sleek and modern design to its powerful and accurate internal components, EnSURE Touch is the essential system for anywhere that cleanliness matters. Designed for the ultimate user experience, it works just like your smartphone and is customizable to your needs. Secured Wi-Fi capability allows you to wirelessly sync with our newest cloud-based data analysis software, SureTrend Cloud, and seamlessly store, manage, and monitor testing results across one or multiple facilities. This is the EnSURE Touch. Innovation at your fingertips. Hygiena, global leaders in ATP and diagnostics testing.
So given some of the circumstances we're currently facing in the world today and some of the recent regulations that are being put in place, Dan, do you want to touch a little bit on how the ATP can help in detection, monitoring, identifying circumstances across so many different markets?
Yeah. Here, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen as well to provide some visual aids as I talk through this. So hopefully you can see that popping up now. But yeah, so the fundamentals of this whole platform really is, verifying clean, right? Being able to define what clean, quote unquote, means at the microscopic scale quickly, cost effectively, and in an actionable way. So you have the results and information in a timely fashion, so you can actually do something about it, right? Traditionally, going back decades, you could verify if there were microbes on a surface. To do that, you would have to take a sample, pack it up, send it off to a lab, which may be in town and maybe several states away, and obviously that takes time, costs a lot more, transportation costs, things like that. And so that was the traditional way to verify cleaning outcomes, right? Is to send the samples off to a lab. And there is still a very important role for labs, right? Because anytime you want to do in-depth analysis with advanced methods, that's going to be in a lab setting. But the key that I was mentioning is, what are you going to do about it, right? So, for example, in an office building or a school or a gym or any place like that now, if you can verify that your cleaning protocols have been followed, and you can also know that they are mitigating risk right up front with a test that just takes a few seconds, you can get results, basically instantly. Then you can do a lot more corrective action much more quickly that way. And that's really what ATP testing does at its core, is it cuts down or basically eliminates entirely that lag time between, doing the cleaning process to knowing if it was followed properly, right? And so if you can use that information to know and have the peace of mind that your cleaning process has been followed appropriately, right? Then what you can do is you can train your staff, right, to again be more effective, more efficient, basically building the right muscle memory to clean properly the first time around every time. And so that way, if you ever do have to send samples off to a lab, or some issue pops up, right, you won't have to you'll have fewer surprises there, basically. So that's really the idea. Is ATP testing allows you to quantitatively demonstrate that you've achieved a goal, a measured goal at the microscopic scale within just a few seconds. So if you didn't hit that goal, right, you can fix it immediately because there is no lag time. You get results in just a few seconds. So a little bit more about Hygiena, just our background. As I mentioned, we've been doing this quite a while. Our ATP platform, over the last several decades here, has been the best-selling one used worldwide, right? And you can see in the slide here, 80,000 plus customers, and all over the world, right? Distributors, things like that. But the innovation that was referenced in the video is our EnSURE Touch luminometer, right? So this device basically made this whole technology as easy to use as a smartphone is, right? So just like you probably have a smartphone in your pocket now or in your desk there, you didn't have to have an Apple training class to use it, most likely. You can pick it up and figure out how to do it pretty intuitively. Same aligns with the touch unit here, right? We've made it just incredibly easy to use so that with very minimal training, basically most users are going to be able to pick up the device, use it, get really good high quality data with minimal training or lead time needed, right? So that's a bit about us. Jim, did you want to kind of go into the questions, because then we can speak to that, and that will really kind of flesh out more a bit about what the applications are, for this technology, and the details of the scenarios that the attendees today will be using it in.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Dan, because I think the questions will help everyone on the call today, as well as those who will review this later, to apply it towards how they can use it in their facilities and how they can actually assess what they're doing right and maybe what they can do better. So let's get down to the real basics. What is ATP testing?
Right. So ATP testing, it's an acronym. ATP just stands for adenosine triphosphate, right? Which, if you remember back to maybe your high school biology class, ATP is the energy molecule that's in every cell, right? So everything that is organic in nature has ATP in it, right? So the idea behind ATP testing is to verify how clean surfaces are, right? Because if you have any type of organic dirt, whether it's living cells or other types of organic material, your goal, right, when you're cleaning things, is to remove that biofilm. Because when you clean properly, you're removing, of course, the living cells, and the risk of infectious agents like microbes or viruses, for example. But you're also removing in the other dirt, right? The biofilm that those cells or those virus molecules will live in, right, or survive in long enough to be able to become, to a place where the conditions are right for their populations to grow and then become infectious, right? We all know that viruses, in and of themselves are not living things, right? They need to be in the right place to be able to take over a cell and utilize its machinery, right, to copy itself and make enough of them to get people sick. So that same principle applies with microbes as well. If you can clean surfaces and remove biofilm across the board thoroughly, you're going to have lower risk, and that's really the end goal.
Dan, is it fair to say this technology was traditionally utilized across regulated industries, and maybe touch on how has COVID and the pandemic created more applications and need for this application?
Yeah, so again, in high risk regulated type of scenarios, like I mentioned in hospitals, right, or in food manufacturing or pharmaceutical manufacturing, verifying that the equipment that you're utilizing, right, is clean is very important, because if you have bad equipment and you're working in a dairy that is making milk, right, if that milk comes out contaminated, right, there's, listeria, salmonella, other types of microbes or contaminants that will make that product unsafe or, low quality in general, right? So in those traditional industries, right, the use of this system was governed by regulatory entities, right, through the government. COVID has really just kind of brought up the scenario where again, cleaning has always been a good idea. It's always a better idea, a good baseline to have a thorough cleaning process. But now it's all just very top of mind that if those processes are not being followed, we're all at much higher risk of catching this new bacteria, or this new virus, that's out there in the world. And so that's really the main driver that COVID has just made ATP testing, a tool that is now applicable in unregulated circumstances, right? Because just like if you're in an office space, you want to know that your desk and maybe the elevator button, right, or any other type of high touch surfaces in the common space are clean and have low risk, just as if it was a piece of equipment in a hospital, right, or an operating room, right. The risk is now similar in that you have this unknown virus that we can't fight. So it's very important to not catch it in the first place, right? And the best way you can mitigate that risk, of course, is to clean properly, clean consistently, and not get sick in the first place, right? That's our best tool to defend ourselves from this pandemic at this point.
Absolutely. And as many of those on the call today and individuals that we work with who maintain and manage open spaces realize that before COVID, there was also a lot of circumstances around other viruses and bacteria, staph, E. coli, MRSA. And so the clean, the disinfect, and the sanitize, this is a great system to be able to measure and evaluate what your cleaning protocol is. In the ATP testing systems around the world, can you name a few that carry weight or most popular?
Yeah, so I'm here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm the Northwest regional guy for Hygiena. So I work with accounts in a variety of industries, right? So just a couple to throw out there in healthcare, right? All of the whole Providence Health and Services Network, right? They have hospitals, all up and down the whole West Coast and beyond actually utilize our system. Multicare is another big user. Harborview Medical Center, it's here in Seattle. It's the only level 5 trauma center, and I think the surrounding 5 or 10 states or whatever it is, they use our system and have for many years. On the food manufacturing side, companies like Amazon, other office space like Microsoft, right? They've been utilizing our system the last several years, actually, or even before COVID hit, because they have a very vested interest in keeping their employees healthy and safe, right? Providing this peace of mind to basically also know that their contractors, right? Their cleaning crews that they hire, they want to know if they're getting their money's worth, right? So that's another aspect of the system, is that it provides quantitative data to show you how well your staff is cleaning. Are they following the protocols you train them to do, right? So those are just a few of the highlights, and there's many more. But some of the big names that you probably recognize that use the system today and have for years. And again, the circumstances in the world today with COVID are just only increasing the awareness and the need for this type of this type of technology out there to drive improvements in consistency in cleaning efforts.
Great. And we deal with many clients that provide their in-house service cleaning as well as work with third parties. So that's obviously important. Mm-hmm. So the video that we opened up with demonstrated how easy the EnSURE Touch operates and evaluates a test. But tell us, how accurate is it?
Yeah, so the system is quite accurate. Basically, from a sensitivity standpoint, right, we can detect down lower, actually, as low as a part per quadrillion, right, or what's called a femtomole of ATP, right? So that's the unit that we're measuring ATP in. And so again, 1 part in a quadrillion. That's a decimal point with 15 zeros and then a 1, right? So that's the sensitivity level that we're at, because the ATP molecules themselves they're not big, right? I mean, again, they're a small molecule inside of a larger cell, right? So its ability to detect is very, very sensitive. And it's also very, very accurate, right? This test, the readout or the scale that it measures in is in relative light units, or RLUs. And so essentially, just to give you an idea of how this system works, and I can forward here, there's a couple of slides I want to show you. So there's basically the 2 parts that you utilize when taking the test. There's these swab devices, right, which you can swab a surface with, right, just like so, that somebody would just have cleaned. And then what happens is you activate the test, right? So these little swabs, they have some liquid chemistry up here in the top in our patented snap valve design. What happens is that sample is collected, then you activate the test, the chemistry mixes with your sample, and then it creates bioluminescence, right, with an enzyme called luciferase, right? So what happens is the ATP molecules react with this enzyme luciferase and glow. They actually bioluminesce. And then it's pretty simple, right? The more ATP that's there, the brighter the glow, the more light that's generated. And the EnSURE Touch luminometer, what it does is it's a light meter, right? So it can detect light at very, very low levels, right? And the way we have it set up, it's a very simple 1-to-1 RLU scale. 1 RLU equals 1 femtomole of ATP, right? So the brighter the glow, the higher the RLU that's generated, that correlates to more dirt, right? And i.e. more risk. And this whole process, this chemistry, and all that, it's not just our claims, which we have a whole library of information that supports it all, and many decades of success. But our system also does hold what's called AOACRI certification. So what that means, it's kind of a lab thing. If you were to take swab samples and send them off to a laboratory, they would use an AOACRI method as well, right? They are equivalent to methods used by regulatory entities like the USDA, the FDA, the CDC, for example. So basically, our system has a third-party stamp of approval, right, through this AOACRI certification that shows that it is, sensitive, consistent, accurate, as we claim it is, right? And that's been, borne out and validated through this independent body that's internationally recognized, right? AOAC methods are used worldwide in all types of testing scenarios.
Well, we found it very informative. Some of the studies that you've done with school districts, hospitals, and some of the readings that they've come back with across multiple surfaces throughout a space. Here at CFE Services, we did some of our own in-house testing and came back with some great information on how our disinfecting and sanitizing solutions work. For clarification, is the ATP test looking for viruses?
So that's a great question. It's not specifically looking for viruses. Again, what it specifically is detecting is the ATP molecules, right? And so the key there, again, is ATP is in everything that is organic, right? Or i.e. Is alive now, as like a microbe, a cell would be, or was once alive, right? Comes from some type of organic source. Even if the source is, the cells in that biofilm, that, whatever the ATP is in, is no longer living cells. That biofilm, again, is where it's going to harbor and sustain microbes and virus molecules so that they can, last long enough to be able to get to where they can be transported into, somebody, right, to make them sick. So the idea is, yeah, again, we all have, seen and heard of the news, we're all worried about touching surfaces these days. That's why we're wearing masks, right? Viruses and cells, they can live on surfaces. The data is showing out there, it's from days to even a couple of weeks if the conditions are right. The variables that affect that are things like, how porous is that surface, right? What's the temperature, what's the humidity, things like that. But also a big factor is how much dirt is there, because the biofilm, right, the oils from our hands that accumulate on surfaces in public spaces, right, from think of office spaces or highly touched surfaces out in public areas. Dirt accumulates on those surfaces, right? And in there's oils, there's proteins, there's sugars, there's grime and grease and whatever, right? Plus microbes, plus viruses. All those things build up in layer after layer. It's almost kind of like think of sand on a riverbed, right? Over time, the dirt builds up and builds up and builds up. And if microbes and viruses are there as well, they're going to actually create this biofilm, right? And this is what these potentially infectious things can live in, underneath, or on, right? And there's the nutrition there that is going to keep them alive long enough to where they could be, if you touch the surface with your hand, and later on, touch your mouth, touch your eyes, whatever it is, right? Then they get into your body, and all of a sudden, that's like sending them to the Hawaii for a vacation, right? There's a perfect conditions for them to go and reproduce themselves, right? Create a bunch more copies of themselves and make you sick, right? So that's the whole process of why fomite transmission is what that's called, is a risk. And you can mitigate that risk again by not allowing those layers of biofilm to accumulate on surfaces, clean them off, right? And you can measure if you're achieving that goal successfully in 10 seconds with an ATP test. Does that make sense on the process for everybody, I hope?
Absolutely. And that just helps reinforce having a clear protocol of cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing, not just jumping to the disinfecting step in some cases. So
yeah,
we have a lot of. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to add on to that. You mentioned the disinfection step, and that's a key thing, right? Because that is one common misconception that we come across, is that people think that cleaning and sanitizing are kind of the same thing. They are two different steps, right? Cleaning is removing those layers of biofilm, right? Getting them broken down so they don't get to accumulate in the first place, right? Or if they have, knocking them down to not there anymore. Sanitizing is just killing the germs and the virus particles that may be there, right? And obviously, if you don't give those germs and virus particles a place to hide, right, your sanitizer is going to be that much more effective, right? So that whole idea of a good cleaning program is to clean properly first, then your ATP test, make sure you've got that biofilm removed, i.e., the places to hide it is removed for the viruses, and then apply your sanitizer as an extra step, because then you have a multi-pronged kind of redundant approach that's going to give you several cracks at removing the risk, right? Which is again is removing those potentially infectious things. So clean first, make sure you got the surface actually clean with an ATP test, then sanitize, because then a sanitizer is going to be that much more effective, and you've built in the proper redundancy to a good cleaning and sanitizing protocol.
And then of course test with ATP, because that just reinforces the need to make sure that your protocols are working effectively as you've established. We have a lot of national health organizations that are outlining guidelines and requirements for applications. Are there regulatory bodies that endorse the use of the ATP test?
Yeah. So again, I mentioned some of the more historical industries that utilize the system. The CDC is one that kind of governs protocols and expectations in the healthcare settings, right? So there's a recommendation that that hospitals and other healthcare facilities use a cleaning verification step. They recommend ATP because it is this best combination of speed, accuracy, sensitivity, and also trackability as well. In other industries, right, like food safety, that's where the FDA and USDA are the two main regulatory entities that require this. And again, if you're making any type of ready-to-eat or higher-risk food product, it is a requirement that you have a cleaning verification step as part of your standard SSOPs, and that's something that they come in FDA inspections and audits. That's something that they look for. and we all hear, on the news, pretty routinely, right? Unfortunately, more often than we would like, but you hear about product recalls, and think of the peanut butter and the ice cream and the lettuce people, in California and in the various places, right? Recalls happen all the time. Companies that are following their SSOPs have a much better chance of not ending up on the news like that, right? Of having a potential recall. In other industries beyond just these ones where these steps are mandated, there are other institutions and kind of entities that have built protocols and recommendations. So these entities, right, like RIA, for example, another one, this is related to contractors and basically sanitation and janitorial companies, right? They have recommendations that they discuss about ATP testing. Another good one is, this is a study, kind of a white paper from the American Public Transportation Association that was done, pretty recently. They recommend ATP testing as a way to mitigate, virus risk specifically. Also, other industries, right? Like for schools, there's a group out there called the ISSA that they have some guidance, for schools, right? So they recommend ATP testing as a way to verify clean outcomes in school settings, right? And this was a recommendation even before the pandemic came along. And now, again, COVID just kind of made it top of mind for everyone, right? Again, cleaning was always a good idea. Having a verification step was always a useful thing, even before COVID came along. But now it's just everyone realizes how much more important it is, because the hospitals are getting overrun in certain parts of the country now because of a lack of preparation, to be able to mitigate these risks, at the cleaning stages. So that's really the benefit there. So these other entities, right, they're not the government, right? They don't require you to do these things in these unregulated facilities, but it is a best practice. It is recommendations and kind of guidelines that will, again, help you prevent risks, mitigate those risks up front. So that way, again, it's not your your clients or your facilities being on the news that's at risk of being highlighted as a place where someone got sick, right? If you can prevent that through these best practices, you're going to mitigate risk and keep people happier and healthier.
Totally agree. And whether you're a service provider or a facility manager, having this inexpensive device on site, being able to test your protocols is beneficial to prevent something like that happening. Real quick, I just want to remind everyone that's joined us today, if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat board. We will be answering those at the end. We've got just a couple more questions. And Dan, I think you touched a little bit on this, but best practices in establishing your testing protocol. Does Hygiena assist in coming up with a plan on where to test and how often in a facility?
Yeah, we sure do. We have basically recommendations for all of the different, kind of applications that we've discussed so far, and more as well, right? So I mentioned, the ATP, remember the basics of it is it's detecting biofilm, and it's a quantitative test, right? So you're going to get a number, and the bigger the number is, the more risk you have there. And obviously in a perfect world, right, you get zeros everywhere because it means you have no risk, right? But again, in the real world, perfection is not always, the bar you want to, are able to achieve. So you have to kind of find a proper balance based upon your applications. And we have guidance, and there's, some support and tools we have available to help you dial in what you want to achieve for your testing applications. Because again, if you're testing in an operating room in a hospital, right, that's a high risk scenario. You're going to have a really high standard. You might want to try to, need to achieve perfection in those scenarios. But in a, in a low risk, environment, right, like an office space or a school, just, maybe an office waiting room, things like that, right, a gym, for example, they're not as high risk as an operating room. So you have to find a balance between how clean do I want to be and what's realistic, given my time, my budget, right, my cleaning protocols, really capabilities. Because, again, we might want to achieve perfection and have zero risk everywhere, but that's not really practical in the real world. You want to find, that balance to be the right sweet spot, right, between setting yourself up to have low risk and good confidence and peace of mind, but not only cleaning all day, every day, and never having the ability to use your space, right, to do business, right, whatever that business is, right? So again, we can't all just be cleaning all day, every day. We need to make sure we have a protocol that's defined good enough to give us peace of mind, applied at the right frequency, but we have to have some time left over to actually use that space for its intended purpose. So that guidance is something that me and my team, we provide for all of our clients. There are some very common kind of standard recommendations, but because the system is quantitative and it's actually very customizable as well, we can help you determine what quote unquote clean means to you and help you achieve a testing target, a frequency, and a set of expectations, and even an SSOP that's going to help you get there consistently, that you can then educate your staff on to achieve that goal and actually drive improvements, right? That's the whole kind of the other piece of this is the training aspect, right? Because once you create the program, and the policy of how your staff is going to clean, ATP is a tool to hold them accountable to that and measure their performance on a regular basis, right? So again, if you have a new person you hired to do cleaning and janitorial work for you tomorrow, you can say, here's the expectation. We're going to train you on this protocol, and then you can keep them accountable by performing the testing, as they get up and running. And pretty soon they're going to have that protocol memorized, built in, and you're going to be able to start to, predict and make sure that the results, are in line with what you expect. But then that process, will repeat itself, right? You only know what you know. So there might be spots that in the protocol or in the facility that you weren't thinking about. And so that you can go and test in those areas and use this process of, testing and then, adapting your protocols to get better and better and better over time. Because, facilities, again, that are very well regulated and, have, very strict protocols like hospitals and food processors and all that right now, they've been doing this a long time, but they're not perfect. That's why we still have food recalls that occur all the time, right? Because every facility, even though you're doing the right thing and you're trying to get better and better over time, no facility is perfect, right? You want to use the data, right, that you're getting from a system like ours to drive process improvements to try to get better and better and better over time. And that's an ongoing process. And I still haven't seen anyone who's perfect out there yet, because, it's a human endeavor, right? So does that make sense how it's an ongoing process, and you want to base your changes that you're making and how you're improving your protocol to be not only more effective, but also more efficient. A really common thing that I see is that, people just tend to use more soap, right? Maybe more sanitizer, right? More chemical on that. They think that's going to minimize their risk more. You could have the best soap in the world, right? The best sanitizer in the world, but if you're not using it properly, right? It's not really going to help you. So the idea is to make sure you're measuring actual outcomes and again, driving the improvements in not only efficiency of your cleaning, but also the actual effectiveness, right? And really get your processes dialed in to have the best of both of those worlds.
Yeah, I know we at CFE Services were very enlightened by the test study you shared with us for the elementary school. Not to get into specifics, but they did show test results from faucet handles, sinks, handrails and stalls, door locks, doorknobs, drinking fountains. And it was amazing to see the difference in levels of ATP across all surfaces and some of the areas that really, really struck out in having to be, cleaned and disinfected more appropriately in the future. Talk to me about the acceptable levels. What are the acceptable levels based on the time of day? Many are stretched thin with staff and they rely on users to wipe surfaces between their usages and staff to spray sanitizers throughout the day. But talk to us about what are those acceptable levels?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, there are going to be different levels depending upon different applications, right? So we can still see my screen here. Actually, let me get to this. So here, sorry, this actually doesn't have it on there. Here's the document I had pulled up. Sorry, let me find the right one. Bear with me here. Sorry.
You're good.
In schools, right? These are the areas again that are going to be tested, right? Think, drinking fountains, high touch areas, right? Things that everyone touches in the room, right? That's again where the dirt layers are going to build up the most, right? So we have levels that recommend, for schools in this range, right? So you'll see there's this green. This is the recommended pass level, right? This yellow here is the caution. And then this red is what we call the fail level, right? So it's a pass, caution, fail system. Because again, right, after cleaning, right, you want to shoot for this number or better, right? If your protocol is dialed in well, you should be able to swab that surface and have confidence you're going to be able to get this type of number. But we all know that the first time someone touches a surface, right, a table or a desk or a water fountain or whatever it is, right, you're not going to have the ability necessarily to clean it again right away, right? Again, dirt builds up over time, and that could be, you know, over a day, right, in a busy classroom, right, or an office building. It could be over weeks, right, or months, even in less utilized, you know, unless, you know, touch surfaces, right. And so basically, the way this system works is that this should be your number you're shooting for right after cleaning. This yellow range, this is, hey, it's not fully just clean, right, but it's not so bad where it's above the level where we want to stop and clean it again right now, because anything above this red upper threshold, right, that's when it's, hey, it's way too dirty, it's above our risk tolerance, right, we want to take a corrective action right now and knock it back down to, you know, hopefully this green number or below, right. So think of it as, you know, this is right after cleaning, this is, you know, it's been a while, but it's not too dirty yet. This is, hey, we got to start right now and fix it type of numbers, right, anything above these levels. And so again, these numbers, right, are based upon, you know, common, you know, classroom settings, right? In operating rooms, for example, these numbers are going to be lower because it's a higher risk environment. One other thing that that can impact this is the surface type, right? Not all surfaces are the same, right? So you may notice, right, cafeteria tables, right? Commonly those are like a laminate material, right? Some type of plastic or, you know, vinyl compound, that if you put that surface under a microscope, you're going to see a lot of nooks and crannies, little bumps and all that in that surface. That's where the dirt's going to kind of hide in those nooks and crannies and those little spaces. If you compare that with like metal surfaces, for example, right, like the sink or the restroom stalls, for example, those are less porous surfaces because they're most likely metal, right? Stainless steel is utilized in high risk applications because it's very easy to clean. Put stainless steel under a microscope, there's not the same nooks and crannies, right? You know, that surface is just as smooth, you know, at the microscopic scale almost as it is, you know, when we're just looking at it. And so those surfaces are easier to clean. And so that's part of what you have to take into account is how cleanable your surface is in the first place. Because you know, you can swab nearly any surface, and I have clients, you know, that swab materials like wood, for example, or even more porous plastic, or even linens sometimes, right? They'll swab those materials, and those have different kind of baseline levels of either background of ATP that's in the material itself, or, you know, just porosity. So when you talk about that balance, you have to take into account what the material is made of, because that's going to dictate how low you can get these numbers in the first place, no matter how well you clean, right? So that's part of what the guidance and the training and support that my team and I provide. If you end up with a system, you know, we have full ability to provide that help and support to get your program customized and dialed in based upon the areas you're going to test.
With reference to that type of testing protocol, good question that came in here while you were talking is, you can check my math, Dan. Average cost per test, is it about $2.35?
About, yeah. Well, we sell these swabs in boxes of 100 is the way that we sell them. And so some accounts, you know, that are not big testers, they may order 1 or 2 boxes a year. Some accounts that are higher risk, that are just big facilities that have to do a lot of testing, they may order, you know, 25, 50 boxes a month, right, or even more sometimes. So the scale of your program is really all over, you know, it depends upon what your needs are, right? And again, it's the process is the same no matter any application, but the details of how often, where, and when you need to test, right, are going to be influenced by your risk tolerance and you know, your scenario. So that's part of the customization piece of this, and yeah, that's the approximate cost per test. But, you know, as your usage grows, right, there are some, you know, volume discounts and things like that that we can talk about based upon your projected usage.
Yeah. And so another question that just came in the same topic is with facilities and many different surfaces and different types of touch points, it could get expensive. Would you be using one swab per surface? Would that be the recommendation for the protocol?
Yeah, I mean, typically you're going to have one swab per place you're testing, right? So that's why, again, I mentioned, some clients use a lot of tests because they have a lot of equipment they're going to be testing. Um, so there is guidance, right? That's what we provide. I mean, typically you're going to be testing not all of your potential sample points every time, right? Because again, that's unreasonable. We can't expect you to just spend all your time cleaning, just like we can't expect you to spend all your time testing either, right? So what you have to do, and this is part of what the guidance and the implementation piece of it is, we help you identify, okay, if you have a school, for example, right? Just because we're looking at schools here, if you have 10 classrooms in your school and you identify 15 test points in each classroom, right there, you just do the math, 10 rooms, 15 in each room, you have 150 potential test points, right? You don't need to test all 150 every time they're cleaned. You pick a subset, right? So you might do 10 per day, for example, and rotate through those, from day to day as you're cleaning until you get all of them, right? And then you let the data you're seeing and the outcomes you're seeing dictate if that's enough or not. Because again, if your team is cleaning so well and they're passing every time, right? It means that you either have your threshold set inappropriately, right? Or your cleaning is just your cleaning is really really great and they're perfect, right? Again, perfection is not something that is it's achievable, right? Potentially if you're really dialed in, but it's not the norm, right? Most of the time you're going to have some kind of failure instance because people forget about areas or they're rushing or whatever. So you want to have that proper balance of how often do we test and let the results guide where we need to test more. And again, you only know what you know. So if you are able to predict every time a result what it's going to be, maybe you don't need to test that spot as much, right? That can be backed off as far as the frequency. But that's when you can test in other areas, right, that you haven't checked in a while, and make sure you're still getting good results in those areas, right? And that's where you want to have this balance of testing in places where you want to drive improvements, try to make sure your process is actually maintaining its effectiveness and efficiency, and it's an ongoing process. So does that make sense? Does that answer the question as far as
Makes great sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As we're talking about different applications, and we mentioned on the front end of this call, different industries where this is applicable and where it's starting to grow and greater importance. What about the spa industry? We've got a couple of clients here on the call today in the spa industry. Have there been applications and use in that particular area?
Yeah, there is actually. So I pulled up one. This is actually a page from our healthcare guide, right? So when it talks about limits, for various, so you can see, right, higher risk areas, operating rooms, ICUs, you get lower numbers, right? We actually do have some ATP test devices that instead of swabbing surfaces, right, like we were talking about before, we actually have ones that are for water tests, right? So we call those aqua snaps, and you can actually sample water samples and test them for ATP, just like you are swabbing surfaces, in this example here. There is, a subset of clients that use, our system in the water quality industry, right? That includes hotels, public swimming pools, right? Even private ones, things like that. And other areas like just water treatment, right? So like think of people running HVAC cooling towers, right? Those type of systems, or water filtration, applications, right? There's ways that you can test ATP in the water as well. And the numbers are, as far as the threshold you would set, are going to be dependent upon what type of treatment you're doing for water, right? So like in a spa, for example, if you're using some type of chlorination or maybe a salt treatment is very common in those industries, we have guidance on what the levels would be for those applications. They're going to be a little bit different than surface numbers, because with water you have other things in the water you have to kind of be aware of, and water, unless you're using DI lab water to fill up your spa, it's you're going to have some background in there, right? Because even clean tap water, from the tap is going to have some background levels of ATP, but that risk is mitigated because that water is treated, right? I.e. the chlorination or whatever, the fluoride or whatever is in the water, it's going to minimize, the risk of any organic material in the water is still infectious or viable, right? So those factors are part of what we do when a client gets a system to make sure, again, that the target thresholds that you set are appropriate for your applications. And so there is no kind of across the board, hey, if you have this, you're doing a spa here, this is the number. There are variations within that we help the clients understand and make sure that they have the number set appropriately.
We did get into a specific demonstration of the scheduling feature on the EnSURE Touch, but it makes it very convenient to be able to actually identify each space, store the test result for that particular area, develop a calendar for the number of tests and zones and areas that you're going to cover, and then start to develop that information into a summary. So last question, and then we'll open it up again. If there's any more questions, feel free to post those to the chat if we haven't answered them for you so far. But many of our clients in our facilities have hardworking staff that are cleaning, and they're trying to follow the disinfecting protocols that the facility has outlined. How do we use this information and not offend them and make them feel as though we're critiquing that they haven't done the job that they were asked to do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And the answer is, most people, like you said, they want to do well at their jobs, and they want to succeed. They want to be, have positive recognition. So, we definitely encourage clients to use the data that you're going to be generating as a positive reinforcement tool, right? And there's a lot of ways we can help with that, but a lot of it's just kind of common sense, right? If you have someone who's maybe not hitting the expectation, they're maybe having more failures than the rest of the team. You don't come down on that and say, hey, you're in trouble, or you're penalized, right? You would approach that and just simply say, hey, we've noticed that something's different about the way you're doing things. How can we help you learn? What questions do you have, right? What is, what are the ways that we can coach you to be, achieving the goals that we have set, right? So that's one way. It's just, approach it from an education standpoint and an opportunity to learn, because people who want to succeed at their job in the first place are going to be pretty open to that, right? That type of constructive feedback. The other way that's really useful is to simply incentivize the right behaviors, right? So one common thing I've seen clients do is pretty simple. You just if you want to share this information and make it public, and at the end of the day or the month, for example, you can generate a report through the software that comes with the system, and you can very clearly see, okay, you got 10 different sanitation or janitorial people. And you can see in a chart, in black and white, who's passing with the highest percentage rate, for example, who has the most passes to fails, right? The ratio of those, things like that. And so you could set up a simple contest where it's like, hey, the person who achieves the best results, this month, maybe they get a gift card to Starbucks or wherever, maybe they get to go home early on a Friday, a couple hours, things like that, right? And so if they're getting that type of positive incentive, all of a sudden the other people on that team that didn't win this month, they're that much more motivated to achieve and win the next month, right? So you incentivize the right behaviors and adoption of the approved protocols that you want to see, again, because that's when your staff is going to be more motivated to do the protocol you've trained them on. And at the same time, you're going to be mitigating risk and achieving a happier, healthier, environment for your business, whatever industry it's in. So simple things like that are very achievable. And again, that's part of what my team and I do throughout the ongoing support we provide, is make sure that you have the tools that you need to achieve those positive outcomes.
Yeah. Well, and overcoming complacency and allowing this to become routine, helping your staff to know how to improve and achieve better outcomes more consistently and more efficiently, and helping them to learn about how this system can actually help them do a better job and mitigate problems.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, I can't see how many other questions we have maybe out there pending, but I do have the ability, the system actually has a remote kind of support demonstration feature in there. I can be happy to walk whoever's on the call here hanging around still to actually just get a feel for how easy to use and how smartphone-like the machine is, and some of these programming capabilities that we touched on briefly, but haven't really got to demonstrate as of yet.
I think at this point, what we'll do in sensitivity of everyone's time is we'll schedule individual Zoom calls with each client. One thing I did wanted to mention is beyond the cost per test, the estimated cost, CFE Services has designed a program where you actually can rent the EnSURE Touch ATP testing device to make it more cost effective for business owners and property managers. And then also, of course, supply them with the swabs for their testing protocol. At this point, I don't see any more questions. Dan, do you have any more closing comments you wanted to share with the town hall today?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. I really appreciate the chance to help you learn about this technology and just kind of show you some of the basics of why it's it's always been important, but due to the current circumstances in the world, is even more so these days. And even as we get the vaccine and all that, and hopefully that the pandemic risk it starts to wane here in the coming months. Again, cleaning has always been a good idea, always been common sense. That's not going to go away even when the pandemic's gone. So the ability to measure outcomes and have hard science-based data to help your team not only mitigate risk, right, but also just become more efficient over time. That has a huge value, and that's even beyond just the pandemic fears right now. That's a way that as a business owner you're going to be able to achieve significant gains. And just decrease things like labor hours and and cost of chemical usage and things like that. Those other ancillary costs by having a better, more highly trained staff that has your protocols dialed in, right? Those other benefits provide even more kind of financial and business sense, even beyond just the upfront one we're all worried about right now of risk mitigation and peace of mind during this pandemic. And then there's that part of it, and then the other piece here, the slide I'm sharing is, remember this whole system, right? It works just like a smartphone. The software piece of it is included. There's no additional costs for that, right? So you have full ability to all through the cloud, right? Just upload the data from the device via any old Wi-Fi connection up to a cloud-based account that is all online, that you can of course then access from anywhere because it's all online, right? So it's very similar to having any other like Netflix or Google account or Disney Plus or whatever, right? You log in with your username and password, and you'll be able to track, analyze, and utilize all the information that your team is generating with the results of the machine from anywhere, all online. So that's a key part of this, and the idea is to not just to test. The idea is to test to drive improvements and get better the next time around, and that's the software is a key part of that end goal, and really adds to the value of the whole platform.
Powerful information and a very efficient system. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for joining us today for our town hall presented by CFE Services. Thanks, Dan Wing with Hygiena, sharing information on the EnSURE Touch ATP testing system. As noted at the beginning, this town hall was recorded and will be available for everyone to review and share with other clients and/or associates. Please feel free to visit our website at cfeservices.co for more information. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to send us an email. We'd be more than happy to reach out to you and answer those. Be well, be safe, take care of those around you, and thank you once again for joining us today. Have a great day.